One of the reasons we're not getting a really good perspective on this crisis sometimes is because so much of the commentary comes out of places like this, out of Sydney, out of central Sydney or Melbourne or Canberra. But of course it's a very different picture once you get further away from the CBDs of our major cities. So to try and gauge this, let's go now to the seat of Lindsay. It's in far western Sydney, as far as you can go, as I said before you hit the Blue Mountains. And Melissa McIntosh is the MP for Lindsay. Melissa, welcome to Watercooler Live.
Thank you. Thanks for having me, Nick.
Now, I would guess, and I will have a look at the ABS stats to back this up, but I would guess that there are many more, a higher proportion of people in your electorate who don't work in offices. You know, they work in manufacturing, some in driving, retail, and those are people that have been, I think, in the front line and often overlooked in this crisis. They're the ones that have been having to go out to work. I mean, you can't be a dustman and work from home, can you?
Well, the thing is, if people in our community in Lindsay, Western Sydney are working in offices, over 300,000 of them are commuting every day for work. And so that means they're on public transport as well, which proves another difficulty for people out in Western Sydney. But you're right, we've got Western Sydney Airport and we have the new rail link coming in, the North-South rail link, and that means construction jobs and trades jobs. So absolutely people are being impacted out here, and we were declared a hotspot at certain stages, particularly when the pandemic was very much in New South Wales. We also had Newmarch House occur in Lindsay, which was a really devastating time for our community. So we've been very much impacted by the coronavirus pandemic, you're right.
Yeah. We heard earlier from Kate Carnell about the plight of small business. How do you gauge the health of small business in your constituency? Are they muddling through, or are there problems there?
It's really varied. So I've been out and about on the ground with local cafes and speaking to the local CBD Corporation, Chamber of Commerce, and they tell me that things are going quite well when it comes to small business in the high street retail trade, and people are feeling optimistic. The question is how optimistic they'll be when we get towards the changes in JobKeeper. Other people are struggling. So we have a local swim school who are really concerned about kids, particularly coming into summer, not having access to learn to swim. So this business is struggling. They're on JobKeeper, but they've also got these other concerns when it comes to children's education and safety. So it's really varied across the community. And then you've got other businesses who are trying to see the potential in the coronavirus and willing to diversify their business and put their hand up to make PPE and hospital gowns. As you said, it's very diverse. We have a very as Prime Minister Howard said, Lindsay is a microcosm of Australia. It's got families, it's got young people, community spirit, and small business.
Yeah, I mean, I think on most measures you can think of, demographic measures, it is right there in the middle, isn't it? Which is probably why it's a decisive, it's a very important seat in every election, because people there, I guess, are of the middle. Look, to go back to May 18th, 2019, to happier times perhaps than we're in the moment, that lovely sunny afternoon.
Yeah.
What's your memories of that day? My memory of being in Lindsay that day is just an enormous smile on your face.
That's very much right. I'd had all that time on pre-poll, and I think during that pre-poll period it was really positive mood on the ground. So election day was a combination of that, and the mood was positive. Excuse me, people were supportive. And it was really just great to get out amongst the community. And that's actually what I really love most, and what I'm struggling with most during the coronavirus pandemic is not being out and be able to, touch people and hear from them face to face what their concerns are. And I think that's one of the on the ground winning attributes we had was being out there and being in front of people and listening to them. In Lindsay, they felt they hadn't been listened to for quite some time. and that was my number one priority. But it was great. That seems like a lifetime ago now. That's the other thing. There was no, if you could just imagine as a first-term MP, after coming off that great election campaign, and then we had the bushfires around this area, and our community, the RFS, here we had Cumberland Zone Command, who were out right across the country. So we very much had our community who was impacted by the bushfires, and we're on the doorstep of the Blue Mountains, and then into coronavirus pandemic. And as I said, Newmarch House and being a hotspot and all the difficulties that come with that to our community, it very much has been
I mean, it's a very unusual year, isn't it, or year and a bit now, to be in Parliament. You'd had a bit of experience, of course, working in Parliament, but in what ways has it surprised you, the job? What didn't you expect?
I didn't expect not to be in Parliament. I can tell you that. I was ready. As you said, I had worked before. I was very privileged to, at a young age, work for Prime Minister Howard. So I got an early idea of politics and what politics is about. But by no means was I prepared for what has come now, and that's what surprised me. I think the desire for me to be able to connect with people and be there for people and advocate has not changed. So that hasn't changed at all. And I think as I said, the only thing that really is surprised is not doing the things that you would normally think you'd be doing by going to Parliament or going out to events. Today I'm going to see Vietnam veterans, but that's really the first sort of outing that I've had in the community for a couple of weeks, because people can't come together, which is really hard.
Yes, I find it quite strange now being somewhere where you have to give out a business card. Hardly find them.
Yes,
it's quite
absolutely.
Let's move on now to the recovery from the COVID-19 crisis. Manufacturing is clearly going to be an important part of that recovery for a lot of reasons. Of course, we're looking now to grow our manufacturing, strategic reasons and so forth. How well placed are we? And I ask you this as somebody in an electorate that has quite a degree of manufacturing right now. One
of the things I started first up was the Lindsay Jobs of the Future Forum, because I actually think we're not well placed for the manufacturing of the future. And I don't think we're training our kids or educating our kids in those jobs enough. So that was one of my first priorities, was to establish this forum, to bring businesses, industry, schools, TAFE, universities together to try and work out how we will educate our kids. And this was, long before the coronavirus pandemic. And then when coronavirus hit, businesses were coming to me saying they want to manufacture Australian made when it comes to critical supplies, so PPE and hospital gowns, those sorts of things, and putting their hand up to diversify and take the risk themselves in their business. Western Sydney, we have a wonderful opportunity, and I very much believe we have the key to bringing manufacturing back to Australia when it comes to advanced manufacturing. When we're building the airport, making sure that we're providing opportunities, global opportunities to local small businesses to get their products out around the world. But it has to be competing and making to manufacturing on quality and value, and using Australian innovation. So we've got a wonderful opportunity. I don't think we're there yet, but there is very much a desire amongst both the academic local community, Western Sydney University, to push this, to grow this industry. There is very much a desire from our small business community. They want it. They're telling me they very much. I get phone calls every day. I get written to that they want us to be backing local manufacturing, and also our constituents have a desire to be buying Australian made more than they ever have.
I think that's right, and it is possible, and I know that because this microphone here is Australian made. It's made by an Australian company called Rode. We're working over there off a vision mixer, which is made by another Australian company, Blackmagic, and the reason we've got them is because if you Google and say which is the best podcast mic or which is the best mixing desk, then these two are featured. They sell all over the world. So I think it's very encouraging to look to this. But of course, there is the problem of intellectual property.
Yeah.
You've looked at this closely, I know. What are your thoughts on it?
It really came out of what businesses were telling me. Concerns from small manufacturers that as soon as they put a product out, that it would get ripped off. It could be as simple as a steel object on a railing that people use to go upstairs. And then that product would be sold at 4 cents cheaper per product. And what really then sort of brought my attention to this was a story that a company told me that they were producing products for railways, and they didn't know that their product had been ripped off until the Victorian government contacted them and asked them to come and review a faulty product that had been used in a contract in Victoria. So they sent down one of their staff to Victoria and found out that a Chinese company had completely passed off the Australian product all the way down to the brand, called it this company's brand. It looked absolutely identical except for some barcoding. And then they found out it wasn't their product at all. It was the Chinese ripoff. And they're absolutely adamant, and so am I from what people are telling me on the ground, that this is happening across our country. And when I've looked into that, the thing is we don't really know how widespread this is or how in depth it goes into manufacturing. That's something we really need to look into because it's impacting Australian businesses.
Yeah, well, it's hard to say how widespread, but 47, I think the figure is 47% of fake goods traded around the world come from China, which I guess brings us to the thorny question of China and our shaky relations with China. What can we do about it if this is happening in China, a country which refuses to play by the rules?
Well, that's a challenge, I think, but that we all have to address as a government. But even before that, we need to, and this is what I found in my research and speaking to businesses, we don't actually, we can point the finger, but we don't actually know how big the problem is. So when it comes to prosecutions of IP theft, there isn't ongoing accurate public data on that. Businesses are can be quite sort of nervous about publicly saying that they've gone through IP theft because of the impact it might have on their brand. And we also don't have constant or sort of sustainable data on seizures at borders. So we don't know what's coming in to our country on an ongoing basis. So I think before we even look at all that, we need to, you can get the data out of countries like the US, so they do a lot of reporting. But before we start to tackle that, I think we really need to do a review and a bit of an overhaul on the way that we record IP theft in our country. Yeah.
But let's go to, manufacturing more broadly. If we're to attract more manufacturing here, if we give businesses the incentive and the opportunity to invest and produce and develop new products, do you get a sense of what the main obstacles are right now? Energy prices, for example, or are there other factors?
Yeah, well, I've actually brought together a manufacturing task force to address these issues. So we want to know what are the obstacles to manufacturing in Australia. And this task force consists of universities, business, industry, to come up with practical solutions. And people are telling me energy prices do obviously have a big impact, as do freight prices. I've heard stories of companies freighting their products offshore to come back into Australia, Sydney to Perth, because it was hundreds of thousands of dollars cheaper than freighting it across the country by train, which would bring more jobs to more Australians. So I think there are a number of barriers, and again, IP theft is absolutely one of those. And there is no doubt as well that although the sentiment of Australian made is really strong now, consumers have a part to play in this. If we want Australian made, we have to be willing to back Australian products. And sometimes that might mean paying a little bit more for quality.
So I guess we're talking here about advanced manufacturing. We want to know what the obstacles are to that.
Absolutely, and that's, as I said, why I have established the manufacturing task force that particularly will look at advanced manufacturing, bringing industry, university, business together to come up with solutions, the practical solutions to some of the big problems we have when it comes to manufacturing in Australia, whether it is energy prices, whether it is IP theft, whether it is freight costs when it's cheaper to freight your products offshore and then back into the country than it is to freight it by train across the country. So we do have a number of barriers, but we have a willingness, a desire amongst the business community, a desire, I think, government at the moment, and a desire for consumers to be purchasing Australian made, but ensuring that we are competing on quality and value when it comes to advanced manufacturing.
So if anybody's got a contribution to make to that task force, any feedback, how should they get in touch?
Absolutely. I'm about to launch a petition, an advanced manufacturing, bring manufacturing back to Australia petition. That will go online. It'll be on my website, melissamcintosh.com.au, and get in touch with my office or send me an email or follow me on Facebook.
That's marvellous, Melissa. It's been terrific to have you on, and I hope you can join us again.
Absolutely. Thank you for the opportunity, and it was a great chat, Nick. Thank you.